Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher.
And I'm Megan Fuller.
Today we're going to talk about the 5 best baits to throw in September.
Wait a second, Mark. Wait. We've been doing the research on this video, and there are a ton of YouTube videos on this already. So if we just do another YouTube video on this, people are going to scroll over it and not watch it, nor should they. And I am a very curious person, so what I want to know is why. Why those 5 baits instead of any other bait? So please explain the reasoning behind those 5.
And I think that's important. So you're seeing all of these videos that talk about what to throw, and quite honestly, they're all going to be very similar in my opinion.
They are all very alike.
But if you know why you're doing it, that's going to help to make your own decisions and to kind of, make better decisions. So the why, September is a transition month. The days are getting shorter. Sunlight's not penetrating as much. But the biggest thing about a transition month to remember is not every fish does the same thing all at the same time.
Okay.
Fish don't always spawn at the exact same time. They come in waves. Fish don't all live in deep water during the summer. Some stay up shallow in the lily pads and things like that. So not every fish does the same thing during the same time of year.
It's like different numbers are going on.
And you brought up numbers. When we're, as fishermen, we want to go to where the most fish are at a time. If the most fish are shallow because it's spawning season, we want to fish shallow because that's where most of the fish are, so our odds are better of catching them. If it's summer and we live on Kentucky Lake where there are ledges, we want to go fish deep because most of the fish are going to move out deep in the summer because that's what they do in the summertime. Being fall, transition means they're all over. Things are moving, things are changing, and they are spread out. They are not condensed in one typical place. You might find some fish that are so deep. You might find some fish that are shallow, but there's some keys that can help you know where in the water column to fish and where you can fish, whether shallow or deep. So fall being the change of sunlight and the amount of sunlight that's penetrating the water based on the amount of time that the sun's out and things like that. The thermocline is rising. The warm water at the top is becoming less than it was during the summer, not as deep.
So does the thermocline help figure out kind of the numbers and the location of where those fish might be?
Well, it helps where in the water column. If you picture the water being this deep and the thermocline is here, in the fall, there's less oxygen in the bottom part. The fish are not going to be there, which means it doesn't make sense for me to be running a bait that's going along the bottom because they aren't going to be there. Add to that the fact that it's fall, less sunlight starts to trigger the fish to know, okay, we need to bulk up for the winter. The metabolism is going to start going down with the colder water. They're going to start feeding. And what are they going to feed on? They're going to feed on the bait fish. All of these baits that I'm about to show you and that all of these other guys on YouTube showed you are mostly going to be mimicking minnows, shad, bait fish type of things.
Which are all top water.
Which are all not so much top water, Megan, but in the top part of the water column. We're definitely going to throw top waters because that's the very top of the water column, but we're going to be in that top portion of the water column.
That's the first time I've used a
fishing bait
term in a sentence.
Nice job. Well done. Okay. Can you name a top water bait?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, you will after this video. All right. So what we're talking about here, we're getting into why. We want to fish in the top part of the water column because the oxygen level is low. We are understanding that fish are starting to feed up for the winter. So we want to mimic those bait fish. One key thing that I think is important is we also want to mimic the size of the bait fish. Guys go and throw a swim bait in the spring and they're throwing smaller swim baits. That makes sense. In the spring, the minnows are small. Minnows aren't small come the fall. They've grown during the summer. Your swim baits might want to be a little bit bigger because you want to match what the fish are used to feeding on at this time of year. Not what you caught them on 3 months ago, but what they're feeding on this time of year. So you're fishing in the upper part of the water column. You're matching the forage that the fish are feeding on, which is going to be typically minnows and things like that. And then the third part that you're keeping in mind is what we just talked about, and that is the fish are spread out. This is not going to be a place where you're going to go, typically, you're not going to go and just whack on them in one area. They're going to be spread out, which means I don't want to be throwing, as much as I love throwing a Cinco or a hover rig or something like that, or maybe even a fluke, I don't necessarily want to be throwing slow moving baits because that's going to take time and there just aren't that many fish here. They might be, I need to move. I need to keep covering water. So the baits that I'm going to typically call the best baits in September are for the most part going to be moving baits. So you talk about topwaters. First topwater I'm going to bring up is our buzz bait. Okay. Buzz bait is a topwater bait, and it's a great fall bait. It's working the very top of the water column. It's mimicking a bait fish on the surface. And when those fish are feeding, they're going to hit a buzz bait. And typically a buzz bait is going to be a big fish kind of bait. Right. I'm also going to stay with the topwaters, and I'm going to throw a spook. Okay. A spook is another topwater bait, mimics the bait fish, and in clear water situations, we're going to be able to throw that spook around and do that. Next bait that I'm going to be talking about works the upper level of the water column, but a moving bait again, a spinner bait. Okay, notice all of these colors, they're all in white. I'm mimicking shad and minnows and things like that. And then the next bait, a spinner bait or a swim jig. Okay, I would say that if I threw a third one in there, another one in there, it would be that swim bait to go in there. So I've got these, plus I might throw a swim bait in there. Okay. The jig is the only bait out of my top 5 that is not a moving bait, but it's still a fast falling bait that I can throw to cover, because those fish there still may be fish that are related to rocks, docks, logs, and I want to be able to throw. I'm going to throw this before I throw a slow falling Cinco type of bait or something like that. So my jig is my one bait that I'm going to be pitching in there.
Is it dark in color to mimic like
a crayfish?
Ah.
Okay. So you got the 5 baits that I recommend for September, but I think your question, Megan, was more important, and the why is the most important part. So when you're out fishing in September, and believe me, this is a great time to be fishing. The pleasure boaters are starting to pull off the water. We get the water back to ourselves, and there's still some really good fishing going on in September. And for the most part, you're not ready to go deer hunting yet, so you got some time to go out and fish. Make sure you use those baits, but know why you're doing it, and kind of put that together with the information about the water column and the sunlight and the fact that the fish are spread out and the fact that they're feeding. I think that'll help you out. I hope it does. I definitely would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Send us your comments, please. We'd love to get that. You talked about that in another video. It would help us out a lot if you sent comments. And we don't care if you agree or disagree. You can send us your disagreements, and we'd like to get that discussion going. Mm-hmm. But we hope you like the information. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Have a good night. Bye.